Final Fantasy VII Rebirth recently had a brand new trailer, and in that trailer, they teased a bunch of new story threads. This game's story might have the most conjecture of any game that I've ever seen, and today, I'm here to add even more conjecture to the pile. So please, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Guys, we just cleared 93,000, and now we are pushing for 94, so let's get the community there and hit a brand new high. Now the thing I want to talk about today is the brand new box art for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. First of all, visually, this is just stunning. Of course, this is the box art for a Nomada game, and you know he is always going to have a very aesthetic box art for any game that he works on. The box art itself is just incredibly foreboding. We have Cloud and Zack separated by Sephiroth and a blood red sky. Square Enix's official blog says that, quote, created by creative director Tetsuya Nomada, the new artwork represents the three worlds that form the axis of the story in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Sephiroth is in the center as he represents the instigator of the events of the past. Cloud and Zack are on the side as they represent their destinies being torn apart by Sephiroth. The image of blood, fire, and red that evokes Sephiroth stains the sky and spreads over the world. The subtle red shade in the logo of this work is also implied by the same imagery, and indeed whenever you look at the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth logo, there is that blood red stain. However, I think if you read a little bit deeper into the words here, it seems to suggest some really interesting things. It notes that there are three worlds. I find this terminology, worlds, to be incredibly interesting because it's also used in the trailer when Sephiroth says that reunion is when worlds merge.
It's upon us. The reunion. When worlds merge.
That is not what that used to mean, at least. So it seems like Sephiroth himself is defining reunion as an entirely different thing. If worlds are being used in the same context here, it's safe to assume that he means what we think of as timelines. Now here's the thing, I was a big fan of the one timeline theory. It seemed to explain everything, that history was rewritten instead of there being multiple different timelines. One of the reasons I was a big fan of this theory is not only did it make sense to me, it would have kept the story from getting far too convoluted, as multiverse stories potentially involving time travel often do. However, it seems that that's not the case, and there do in fact seem to be multiple worlds. However, one thing I was right about is that there wouldn't be two timelines, there would have to be at least three. Everyone was so focused on the Beagle and Terrier timeline that they forgot about the third timeline that is referenced throughout the entire game, and that's the timeline of the original Final Fantasy VII, aka the Dogless timeline. And if his goal is to merge the worlds, then eventually, one timeline theory will indeed be correct. I do think the merging of the worlds is inevitable, and it's the whole point of having Zack around. At some point, he will interact with the party, and I presume will join in the fight against Sephiroth, though this raises a ton of questions. First of all, is Zack from this new world the exact same Zack? I mean this in the sense that is Trunks the same as future Trunks? It's one of those things really where in these time travel-y multiverse type stories, they all kind of handle that a little differently. So it's even hard to say if this is the exact same Zack or if this is a different Zack, or if that timeline Zack is the same Zack but he branched off into that different timeline. I would assume that if they're doing this for the sake of introducing more fan service, that this has to be the same Zack that so many people know and love. And we have three different worlds here, and Sephiroth is talking about merging them. It's great to see that Sephiroth has finally played Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. My man is going to bring forth the rejoining. And if you look at Zack's world, there's what appears to be like a tear in the sky. And again, there is text on the screen talking about the worlds, with it saying, the world will be saved, but will you? With the Japanese version saying something more like, will you be in the world that you protect? Again, there is a lot of use of this word, the world, and it's also been used plurally multiple times. So it seems to not mean the planet, not Gaia, but it's instead this way of referring to these multiple timelines. And as Sephiroth Sephiroth says his new reunion is to merge them. The description of the artwork also says that it represents their destinies being torn apart by Sephiroth. We've already seen Zack's destiny being changed, but indeed, changing Cloud's destiny would result in a very different end. When fighting the Arbiters, Nanaki even said himself that the ending of the original Final Fantasy VII is the future that will happen if they don't defeat the Arbiters.
What the hell did I just see?
A glimpse of tomorrow if we fail here today.
This already implies that by defeating the Arbiters, that everything is on a different course. Of course, Aerith also offered the same language at Destiny's Crossroads, that by altering the course of fate, that they might even become different people. Now, this all makes sense given what we know, but the biggest question that I have regarding all of this is what's going on with the duplicate characters in each timeline? It means that we have literally 2 of every character. Maybe not so much 2 anymore, as most of the party is dead in Zack's timeline. However, we do know that there are at least 2 Clouds now, and considering that the OG timeline might also be its own separate timeline, that would mean that there would be 3 Clouds, right? This seems like a lot to manage, and doing so in a really meaningful way is going to be really tough. There was already some criticism that death wasn't as meaningful as it was in the first part of Remake, but making death as meaningful when you're going to have duplicates of all of these characters is going to be really interesting. I also suspect that the world's merging happening at the climax of this game, meaning that at the very least, by the time we get to the 3rd game, there will indeed only be one timeline, the merged world, everything written as Sephiroth would want it to be. This game is heavily teased to end with the death of Aerith, and whether that still happens due to the course of destiny being altered by Sephiroth, and whether or not he still has the same plans, that all remains to be seen. But I think that's only the tip of the iceberg. I think this game is going to end with Sephiroth having a major victory over the party, and that is going to be his merged world. However, during the build-up of these events, it's going to be really interesting to see how these different worlds interact with each other. I'm under the assumption that Zack will also be chasing after Sephiroth. All of this would eventually lead him and Cloud to the same place. And presumably, but honestly at this point, who is to say for sure? Shout out to patron Tim Rogers and the rest of the Ultima community.